Arizona Territory, 1878. The desert wind carried grit and judgment as heavy as the stairs that followed Julietta North every time she walked down Main Street in Dry Valley. Folks called her the preacher's disgrace, the widow's burden, and worse. None of it was fair. None of it was true. But truth had never mattered much in a town like this. Julietta kept her chin high as she stepped out of the general store with a sack of flour under one arm and a baby blanket tucked under the other. Her dress clung heavy with dust. She had not spoken a word to anyone in 2 days except to ask the price of eggs. No one offered help. No one ever did. Her 5-year-old daughter, Violet, waited beside the wagon, little hands fussing with a ragged doll. "Did they say anything this time?" Violet asked, her voice soft as cotton. Julietta dropped the flour into the back of the wagon and shook her head. "No, baby, not today." They rode back to the edge of town, to the sagging house her late husband had left behind. He had been gone near 2 years now, shot dead in a card game in Prescott. Turned out he had debts, more than she could count. Then came the whispers, then the stares. And when she gave birth to her second child alone, then stillborn, the town gave her a new name, Unwanted. She had no family left, no friends, just Violet and a patch of land too dry to plant. The only visitor she ever got was the wind until that morning. It was near noon when the knock came. Julietta opened the door expecting the sheriff, maybe another warning about taxes, but it was not the sheriff. The man standing on her porch wore buckskin and carried a rifle across his back. Tall, quiet-eyed, and still as stone. "I am looking for water," he said. Julietta stared. His skin was weather-worn and sun-darkened, his black hair tied back. Navajo. She had seen men like him ride with the scouts during the war with the Apache, but they never came to Dry Valley. She hesitated. "There's a well back of the barn," he nodded once. "Thank you." He made no move to leave. She stepped aside. "You can use the bucket." He followed her around the house where the old well sat shaded under a warped cottonwood. She watched him lower the bucket, muscles shifting under his shirt as he worked the rope. He drank, then poured a second bucket and offered it to Violet, who had crept around the corner, wide-eyed. "Is he a soldier?" Violet whispered. The man crouched beside her and offered the tin cup. "No." "I was a scout. My name is Sani." Violet took the cup with both hands. "My name is Violet. I am 5. Julietta watched closely, no fear in her daughter's eyes, just curiosity, no judgment in his. Sani nodded. "That is a strong name." Violet beamed. Julietta stepped forward. "You said you were a scout." "I was, for the army, Fort Wingate." "Not anymore," he straightened. "Not since they finished using me." She understood that more than she liked. "You need food?" "No," he said, "just water and, I saw smoke, your chimney." "I thought there might be someone here." Julietta crossed her arms. "There is, just us." He looked at her then, and something passed between them. Not pity, not judgment, just stillness. "I will be on my way," he said, but before he could turn, Violet said, "You can stay if you want." "We have beans." Julietta's breath caught. Sani looked at her. "If it is too much, it's fine," she said, too quickly. "We have enough." She could not say why she let him stay. Maybe it was the way he looked at Violet, not like she was a burden, but something bright. Maybe it was the silence in him that felt kinder than any words she had heard in months. That night, they sat around the small fire in her yard, the stars sharp above them. Violet curled up beside Julietta, full and warm. Sani sat a few feet away, not speaking but not leaving either. Julietta broke the quiet first. "Why Dry Valley?" "I was following someone. A man who took something from my people." She nodded. "You think he's here?" Sani looked toward the town. "Maybe. I saw his horse near the canyon trail. He will come through." She waited. "And when he does?" "I will take back what is ours." Julietta should have been afraid, but she was not. Maybe because she saw something else in him, control, not violence, purpose, not anger. "You can stay until then," she said. "If you want." He nodded once. The next 2 days passed slowly. Sani helped mend the roof. He fixed the broken hinge on the barn door. He even showed Violet how to track lizards in the sand. Julietta watched him quietly, unsure what to make of the way her chest pulled tight when he smiled at her daughter. By the third evening, she found herself waiting for him to come back from his walks. That night, as the sky bled orange behind the hills, Violet fell asleep in her arms again, and Julietta looked across the fire at Sani. "You know they hate me in that town," she said. He met her eyes. "I saw. They say I'm cursed, that my husband died because of me, that my baby died because I'm wicked." Sani's voice was steady. "They are wrong." She looked away. "You do not know me. I know enough." She felt tears press behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Why are you kind to us?" Sani did not answer right away. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a carved piece of bone shaped like a bird. He handed it to her. "My sister died when I was a boy," he said. "No one would speak her name after, said she was taken because she had shame." But that was not true. It was not her fault. It was never her fault. Julietta held the carving in her palm. "You remind me of her," he said quietly. She could not speak. The next day, trouble came. 3 riders from town men Julietta recognized from the saloon rode up to the house. They dismounted, loud and laughing, but their eyes were mean. "We heard you got company, North," one of them called. "Heard you took in a savage." Julietta stepped onto the porch. "You need to leave." One of them spat in the dirt. "Or what?" Before she could answer, Sani stepped into view from around the barn. He did not speak, just stood there, tall and steady. The men hesitated. Then one of them reached for his belt. Sani moved like a shadow, fast, silent. In seconds, he had the man's arm twisted behind his back, the gun on the ground. "Go," he said calmly. They went. That night, Julietta stood beside him under the stars. Violet slept inside. "Thank you," she said. Sani turned to her. "You do not need to thank me," but she did. Not just for that. For everything. She reached for his hand. He let her. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "You are the first person who ever made me feel like I was not broken." He touched her face, gentle. "You are not." And when he kissed her, it was not rushed or forced. It was quiet, true. Like something that had always been waiting to happen. She did not pull away. Neither did he. The morning after the riders left, Julietta found Sani at the corral, mending a length of fence with a quiet precision that made him seem more part of the land than a man passing through it. The sun had barely cleared the hills, casting long shadows that stretched across the hard, packed ground. Violet sat cross-legged nearby, tracing shapes in the dust with a twig. Julietta stepped through the gate, her apron still damp from washing. "You didn't have to fix that. It's held together this long." Sani didn't look up. "It leans too far east. Wind'll take it down by summer." She watched him drive a fresh post into place with a worn mallet. "You always fix what isn't yours." "I don't think of it that way." She leaned her hip against the fence. "How do you think of it?" He paused, then said, "If something needs doing, I do it. Doesn't matter who it belongs to." Julietta knelt beside Violet and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's cheek. Violet looked up and grinned before returning to her game. "I never asked how you lost your sister," Julietta said softly. Sani's hands stilled. "Raid, before the long walk. Soldiers came looking for sheep. They took more than that. I'm sorry. I was gone that day, hunting with my father." She didn't press further. It was enough that he had told her. She knew the weight of a story too long kept, knew how it thinned a person from the inside. Later that afternoon, she found him near the creek bed, kneeling beside the water with his rifle laid across his knees. He was watching a trail of distant dust rising beyond the ridge. "More riders?" she asked quietly. "Could be, might just be cattle." He stood, brushing grit from his trousers. "You have a place you go when you want quiet." She glanced toward the juniper grove west of the house. "There's a spot near the rocks. No one goes up that way. Too steep." Sani nodded. "Show me." She hesitated, looking back toward the house. Violet sat on the porch, swinging her legs and humming to herself. "Let me ask her to stay close." They walked together in silence, the path rising with the slope. The sun pressed hot against Julietta's back, but she didn't mind it. The stillness between them had grown easy, not the silence of strangers, but of people who didn't need to fill the air with noise. At the top of the ridge, a shelf of stone jutted out above the valley. Below, the land spread wide and harsh, dotted with brittle shrubs and scattered mesquite. A hawk circled in slow, wide arcs. "This is yours," he asked. "I come here when I don't want to be seen." He crouched beside her and ran his fingers along a pale vein of quartz in the rock. "You ever think of leaving? Used to. Had a cousin in Missouri. But after Michael died, I didn't have enough left to go." He looked at her. "You still don't. I've got Violet, and a roof that doesn't leak anymore." He didn't smile, but his eyes warmed. "That's something." They sat until the sun dipped low, their shoulders nearly touching. When they rose, she didn't step away. That evening, after Violet had gone to bed, Julietta lit the oil lamp and found Sani sharpening his knife at the kitchen table. The fire was low, and the room smelled of beans and wood smoke. She poured 2 cups of water and set one down beside him. "You always expect trouble." "Not always. But I don't look away from it either." She sat across from him. "You think those men will come back? They might. They didn't come for me. They came because you stood on your own." Julietta traced the rim of her cup. "I've had worse." He studied her a moment. "I don't think that makes it right." He set down the knife and leaned back in the chair, fingers drumming lightly on the table. "In my mother's stories, women were the ones who held the people together. They carried the water, the songs, the names. They even carried the land when the land couldn't carry itself." Julietta looked at him, something catching behind her ribs. "She'd have liked you," he said. Julietta stood and crossed to the stove, needing the motion. "I'm not sure I've ever been liked by a mother before." Sani rose too. "That's not because of you, that's because people forget how to see." She turned then, slow, and he was close, closer than he'd ever stood inside her home. She could feel the heat of him, the smell of leather and sun-worn cloth. "I don't know what this is," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It doesn't have to be anything yet," he said, "but it can be something." She reached for his hand, her fingers brushing his, and this time it was her who closed the distance. When he kissed her, it was quiet and steady, like the slow pull of the earth turning. Nothing hurried, nothing uncertain, and when he stayed that night, it was not out of pity or need. It was because they both understood what it meant to be seen and still chosen. A week passed without incident. The dusty roads into Dry Valley stayed quiet, and no more riders came near Julietta's land. Sani didn't speak of the man he was following. He spent his mornings checking the perimeter of the property, his afternoons repairing the chicken coop or hauling water when the wind made the well temperamental. Violet followed him like a shadow, asking questions he never seemed to mind answering. Julietta watched from the porch most days, mending what clothes she could salvage from the trunks in the attic. Her hands stayed busy, but her thoughts didn't. They drifted to the way Sani stood still before sunrise, listening to the breath of the land, to how he never raised his voice even when Violet tested her limits, to how his presence made the house feel less like a place she was surviving in and more like something sturdy. One morning, while Violet napped inside after chasing chickens through the yard, Julietta joined Sani near the edge of the field where the soil turned poor. He was gathering stones into a pile, clearing a path for runoff when the rains came. "You always this patient with land that fights back?" she asked, shielding her eyes from the glare. He stood and dusted his palms. "Land doesn't fight, it waits until we learn how to listen." She crouched to help, lifting a flat rock and adding it to the pile. "I never had time to listen." Things always needed to be done fast or they didn't get done. Sani nodded toward the house. "You did them anyway." Julietta brushed her hands on her skirt. "Some days I feel like the only thing I've done is hold everything together with thread and luck." Sani looked toward the West Hills. "That's more than most." Their eyes met then, not in silence but in understanding. That evening, while Violet helped peel root vegetables for supper, Julietta found Sani near the barn smoothing a length of hide over a flat board. "Is that for a bow?" she asked. "No," he said. "A drum." "For Violet," Julietta blinked. "She's never had anything like that." "I know," he said, tying the sinew tight. "She told me." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the careful way he worked. "Why do you do these things for her?" He looked up. "Because I see her." Julietta stepped closer. "And me," he didn't answer with words. Instead, he set the drum aside and took her hand, drawing her fingers to his chest over the steady beat beneath his shirt. His eyes never wavered, she swallowed. What happens when you find the man you're tracking? I take back what was stolen. His expression didn't change. Then I stay. You'd stay, her voice cracked on the last word, if you let me. Julietta turned her face away, dizzy with the weight of it. I've never been someone people stayed for. You are now. The next day was market day. Julietta rarely went, but they were low on salt, and Violet had outgrown her boots again. She hitched the wagon early, packed bread and dried apples, and tucked the coin purse deep into the folds of her dress. Sani insisted on going with them, though he didn't ride up front. He walked alongside the wagon, rifle slung across his back, boots silent even on gravel. The townspeople didn't speak when they arrived. Most turned away outright. Julietta kept her shoulders square and her pace steady, Violet's hand tight in hers. At the dry goods store, the clerk set their items on the counter without meeting her eye. When they stepped back outside, Sani was waiting by the horses. A man across the street stared too long before muttering something to the cobbler beside him. Julietta saw Sani's jaw tighten. "Leave it," she said quietly. "I've left too many things," he replied. She touched his forearm. "Please." "This one's not worth the trouble." He didn't answer, but his eyes softened. They rode home beneath a sky the color of cooled ash. Violet slept with her head in Julietta's lap, the new boots tucked beneath the seat. Sani walked beside them the whole way, never once falling behind. That evening, after supper, Julietta found Violet asleep on the floor beside her new drum, her fingers still curled around the edge of it. Sani stood near the door, watching the girl with something close to wonder in his face. "You made her feel like she matters," Julietta said. "She does." Julietta stepped into the room, the floor creaking underfoot. "I want you to stay." Sani looked at her, quiet for a long moment. "Then I will." She reached for him, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't slow or tentative, it was full, certain, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for anything but gave everything anyway. That night, she didn't sleep alone. And when she woke to the sound of coyotes far off in the hills, she found his arm around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to keep watch for everything that might go wrong. The first frost came quiet, laying a thin silver film across the roof shingles and fence rails before the sun had time to shake it loose. Julietta woke early, as she always did, with Violet curled close against her and Sani already gone from the bed. She found him outside, arms crossed, watching the ridge beyond the field as if listening for something she couldn't hear. She stepped into the yard, shawl drawn tight. "You see tracks," he didn't turn. "Smoke, far off, not from a homestead." "Could be the man I followed here." Julietta's stomach pulled, but she kept her voice steady. "Will you go to him?" "I'll wait. He'll have to ride through the saddle trail if he means to reach town. That's the only pass that won't flood after first snow." She nodded, tucking that knowledge away. "I'll make coffee." Violet was already stirring when she came back inside, hair tangled, cheeks flushed with sleep. "Is it winter, Mama?" "Not yet," Julietta said, brushing a hand over her daughter's brow. "But it's close." After breakfast, Sani asked if he could borrow the mule cart. "I can bring back more firewood from the canyon edge. Yours won't last the month." Julietta handed him the reins. "Take the path through the cottonwoods, the east slopes washed out." He looked at her a moment. "I'll be back before supper." When he left, the house felt colder despite the fire. Julietta kept busy washing linens, scrubbing the hearthstone, hemming Violet's sleeves with thread she'd bartered for the week before. Still, the hours stretched. Violet sat at the table, drawing with charcoal on a scrap of canvas. "Is Sani going to be our family now?" Julietta stilled, needle halfway through cloth. "Why do you ask that?" "Because he helps. And he looks at you like you're not tired." Julietta set the sewing aside. "That's not how families are made." "Then how are they?" She thought of all the ways she'd been told it was supposed to happen: courting, permission, church bells, but none of those had ever fit her life. She looked at her daughter's face, serious and unblinking. Sometimes, Julietta said, people find each other after a lot of wrong turns, and if it's quiet and good, they stay. Violet considered this. Then I hope he stays. Sani returned just before dusk, the cart piled high with mesquite and juniper, his jacket damp with creek spray. He unloaded without a word, stacking logs with practiced rhythm. Julietta brought him a tin of stew and a dry towel for his hands. He took the food, but his eyes stayed on the ridgeline. I saw hoofprints near the west bend, fresh. 2 horses. Think it's him? I think he's waiting for dark. Julietta stepped closer, voice low. Do you need help? Sani's glance flicked to her, then back to the hills. Just watch the house, keep Violet near. She pressed her hand to his arm. I'll do that. He left on foot an hour later, rifle slung, knife at his belt, silent as twilight. Julietta barred the doors, lit the lamps, and sat with Violet near the hearth, reading from a battered book of parables. Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes flicked to the window with every gust of wind. When the knock came, it wasn't Sani. Julietta rose, heart hammering, and pulled the rifle from behind the door. Who's there? A man's voice answered, slurred and bitter. I know he's here. She didn't open it. Ain't nobody here but me and my daughter, you lion. I seen him, saw him at the canyon cut, that Navajo. Julietta placed herself between the door and Violet. You need to leave. There was a thud, then a curse. He took my horse, took the rifle I won fair. Julietta raised the gun. You so sure you want to test that door? Silence. Then footsteps retreating, Violet's eyes were wide. Mama. Julietta knelt, locking eyes with her. We're all right, you stay here, don't move from this spot. She stepped outside, heart a drumbeat in her throat. The stranger was gone, but a shape moved at the edge of the cottonwoods. Sani. He came into view carrying a rifle and a weathered saddlebag, his lips split, shirt torn at the shoulder. Julietta ran to him, catching his arm. You hurt? Not bad. You got him. He opened the saddlebag, revealing a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Inside was a beaded sash worn with age and a silver concho belt. He took these from a burial near Chinnell. They belonged to my uncle's wife. Julietta touched the cloth gently. You'll return them. I will. They walked back to the house together. Sani moved slower than usual, favoring his left side. Julietta supported him without comment, her hands steady at his back. Inside, Violet rushed to him. Did you win? He managed a tired nod. I did. Julietta helped him to the chair beside the fire, then knelt to unlace his boots. Rest now, you've done enough. He caught her wrist, his fingers warm despite the cold. There's one thing left. She looked up, questioning. I want to make this home. If you'll have me. Julietta didn't answer with words. She stood, leaned down, and kissed his brow, then his mouth soft, certain, and without fear. The house held its breath around them, then settled. Violet clapped once, then curled beside the hearth, drum in her lap. Julietta turned to stoke the fire, Sani's hand still in hers. Outside, frost touched the windows again, but the warmth inside held steady. A week after the man had come to their door, the days turned colder. Not the chill of dry wind, but the deep, settled kind of cold that came from the earth itself, seeping into boots and windowsills and bones. Julietta used the leftover flour to bake flatbread, stretching what she had until the next shipment came in by freight wagon. The larder was thin, but the house was full in its own way. Sani spent most mornings carving. He used the edge of a smooth, bladed knife to shape small figures from cottonwood branches, birds, a bear, once a pair of clasped hands. He gave one to Violet every few days, until she had a growing family of creatures lined up along the mantel. When Julietta asked why he carved always with such focus, he said, "It keeps the silence clean." That morning, Violet sat at the table, tongue pressed to her lip as she copied letters from the book Sani had brought back from the trading post. He'd bartered for it with the last of his silver buttons. The pages were worn, but the words were legible, and Violet traced them like they were treasure. Julietta folded the last of the washing and hung it by the stove to dry. "Do you still think of leaving?" she asked without looking up. Sani didn't answer right away. He was seated beside the hearth, mending the strap of one of her work shoes. I don't wonder what's beyond the ridge anymore if that's what you mean. She turned toward him. So this is enough. It's more than I thought I'd find. She crossed the room and crouched beside him. I want to marry you, she said, quiet and plain. Sani set the shoe down. Then we will. No preacher in town will do it. They don't need to. He took her hand. Among my people, a bond is made by choice and kept by care. If you stand with me, I stand with you. Julietta turned her palm to his, the way she'd seen him do with Violet when teaching her to track prints. Then we're already joined. That afternoon, Julietta rode into town with Violet to collect a parcel from the freight office. Sani stayed behind to finish sealing the window frames before the snow came. Violet sat beside her on the wagon bench, clutching a cloth pouch that held the carved animals. She planned to give one to the old woman who ran the post, so she has company, she explained. The town looked different this time. Slower, less sharp. A few heads still turned, but no one stepped in their path. At the freight depot, Julietta signed her name with a steady hand. The parcel held cloth bolts and sewing needles supplies she'd ordered weeks ago. Forgetting she'd ever doubted she'd need them, on the way out the sheriff tipped his hat. Miss North, she paused. Sheriff. His eyes flicked to Violet, then back to her. You doing all right? Better than all right, she said. He nodded once. You let me know if any of those boys from the saloon come round again. They won't. The ride home was quiet. Violet fell asleep against Julietta's side, the pouch of animals clutched to her chest. The sky had begun to gray with the weight of snow. Sani was waiting near the corral when they returned, a new gate latch in hand. Julietta climbed down, heart full in a way she hadn't known was possible. You were right, she said as he took the reins. About what? Some things don't need to be spoken to be made true. That night they stood together in the yard beneath a sky thick with cloud. No stars, just the hush of snow beginning to fall. Violet watched from the window, her small face pressed against the glass. Sani took both of Julietta's hands in his. You are my home, he said, not the land, not the house. You, Julietta leaned into him, her head against his chest. Then you're mine. They married the next morning, not with papers or witnesses, but with a braid of grass tied around their joined wrists and Violet standing between them, holding the carved bear as solemn as a bell. The winter passed with storms and frozen mornings, but never once did the fire go out. Julietta sewed boots from hide Sani tanned himself. He built a sled for Violet and taught her to read the sky for signs of thaw. They planted nothing in the frozen ground, but still, things grew. In spring, Sani rode north for 5 days to return the burial items to his uncle's family. He took Violet's carved animals with him and brought back a woven sash dyed with crushed berries, which he tied around Julietta's waist without a word. By summer, the house had a new roof, a drying shed for herbs, and a coop full of hens that Violet named after storybook queens. The town still kept its distance, but a few began to nod in passing. Julietta didn't care. She had everything she'd ever hungered for and more. One evening, as they sat on the porch with their legs touching and the air warm with honeysuckle, Julietta rested her head on Sani's shoulder. I used to think I was meant to be alone, she murmured. You never were. I believe you. He kissed her hair and wrapped his arm around her, and they watched the sun dip below the ridge in perfect silence. Inside, Violet slept with her carved animals in a circle around her pillow, the drum beneath her bed, and the sound of her laughter still echoing in the rafters. And so they stayed, together, whole, unshaken, loved.